There is a manuscript older than language. It has no cover, no title, no beginning. It is not written in ink but carved into the way cold-blooded creatures move through time. The Reptilian Codex is not a book. It is a way of thinking, a geometry of the mind that appears, unchanged, in every age where control outlasts chaos. Long before humans shaped the first alphabets, long before they imagined gods, there were those who studied the patterns of survival. They noticed that while warm-blooded creatures burned with passion and died with it, those who learned to cool the flame could wait, could watch, could endure until the fire of others burned out. And so, out of patience, came a doctrine. Out of waiting, came a codex. The codex is not morality. It does not ask you to be good or evil. It is not a religion. It does not worship. It does not promise heaven. It offers only this, that the cold mind, sharpened to a blade, is stronger than any weapon, stronger than any passion. Hidden schools have preserved these patterns. In fragments. In symbols. In 7 unbroken principles that those who walk the path of the coil call the laws. Those who carry these laws in their bones move differently through the world. They are not touched by panic. They are not distracted by the warmth of emotion. Their hearts slow. Their thoughts become deliberate. Where others rush, they pause. Where others dream, they observe. They are not without feeling, but they have placed feeling in a box and learned to open it only when the time serves them. These are the 7 laws of the cold mind. Not commandments. Not rules. Mechanisms. The first is the law of form. In the Codex it is written, form determines behavior. Behavior determines evolution. The shape you inhabit, the way you hold yourself, even the stillness of your gaze, these are not accidents. They are messages you write into the world. Every act of discipline inscribes a line in your own design, and design is destiny. The reptilian mind sees the body not as decoration but as a map. If you let your form collapse, so will your life. If you sharpen it, everything else sharpens with it. The second is the law of stillness. Movement without purpose is death. The warm-blooded mind cannot be still. It rides in its own heat. It fills the air with words, with actions, with frantic waste. But the cold mind waits. When it moves, it does so like an arrow, without tremor, without hesitation. Every unnecessary motion is a crack in the armor. The Codex teaches the art of waiting so completely that the enemy forgets you are there. The third is the law of consumption. What enters becomes what you are. Food is code. What you take in, whether it is flesh, light, or thought, becomes the matter of your own existence. The Codex strips desire from eating. Hunger becomes mathematics. To consume without awareness is to dissolve into the crowd. To consume deliberately is to build yourself, bite by bite, thought by thought, into a new architecture. The fourth is the law of observation. To see is to survive. In the warmth of human life, most people look only at themselves. The cold mind sees outward. It sees patterns others ignore, the tightening of a fist, the way a city breathes, the rhythm of power rising and falling like tides. To observe is to master without touching. The Codex says, when you see everything, you no longer need to fight everything. The fifth is the law of distribution. Resources belong to the one who can distribute them. This law is often misunderstood. It does not speak of wealth but of control. Possession is weakness, the thing you own can be taken. But if you control the flow, of food, of knowledge, of loyalty, then all things come through your hands whether you touch them or not. The cold mind does not cling. It opens its palm and makes others bring what it requires. The sixth is the law of memory. Nothing is forgotten, but not everything must be recalled. Memory is a weapon. But like any blade, it can wound the hand that holds it. The Codex teaches the art of layering memory, of burying pain where it can be used later, like a venom stored in a fong. Nothing is forgiven. Nothing is lost. But not all things are worth reliving until the moment requires. And the seventh, whispered even among those who carry the coil, the law of extinction. What does not adapt must vanish. By intent. The Codex does not wait for weakness to fall on its own. It seeks it out. It removes it. Not out of cruelty, but because the cold mind knows that survival cannot afford the luxury of sympathy. Those who cannot adapt become fuel for those who can. These are the 7. They are not human. They are not gentle. And yet, if you trace the greatest empires, the deepest bloodlines, you will find these laws engraved in their rise. To understand them is to change the way you move through this world. But to live them, that is something else. When something ancient inside you stirs at what you're hearing, do not ignore it. Press subscribe on this channel, give that impulse back, and the answer that returns may change the way you see everything before this video is over. The first law is the most deceptively simple. It does not speak of magic. It does not require ritual. It begins with something every creature already has: a body. Form determines behavior. Behavior determines evolution. The architects of the Codex believe that the shape of a creature is not just a shell. It is a script, and every muscle, every posture is a line in that script. A bent form writes weakness. A straight form writes dominance. They observe that those who carry their body with intention move differently, decide differently, and in time even think differently. In the cold jungles of the ancient earth, survival belonged not to the strongest, but to the ones who knew how to shape themselves. A reptile flattens its body against stone to vanish. It raises its head to watch. It coils when it waits. These are not instincts alone. They are decisions engraved into the body. Over ages, these decisions became structure. And that structure became power. The human animal forgets this. You are taught that your body is decoration, something you cover with cloth, something you move without thinking. But the Codex says that every idle movement, every slump of the shoulders, every shallow breath is a signal to the world and to yourself. You shape the container, and the container reshapes what lives inside it. This is why those who follow the law of form live as if their flesh were a weapon to be maintained. They do not let their hands fidget without reason. They do not let their eyes wander without purpose. They do not bend until the situation demands bending, and when they do, they return to stillness. In the hidden texts, there is a teaching called the 3 angles of presence. It is said that there are 3 lines that must never be broken. The first is the spine. To the cold mind, the spine is not just bone, it is the central pillar of control. When the spine is straight, the breath is deep and slow. When the spine bends, panic can creep in unnoticed. The second is the line of the gaze. Warm-blooded creatures dart their eyes like prey. They are pulled by every noise, every flicker of light. The reptilian gaze is deliberate. It does not chase, it fixes. The Codex says, if your gaze wanders, your will wanders with it. The third is the triangle of the stance. Feet, hips, and shoulders in alignment, an architecture that tells the world, I am ready, and I am not afraid to wait. It is a stance that can hold silence without effort. Those who train in these angles begin to change. At first, it is small. They notice they do not stumble in crowds. They speak less. They listen more. In time, their breath slows. They eat differently. They begin to choose the direction of their thoughts the way a hunter chooses a path. And yet the Codex warns that this law is not a trick for appearing strong. Pretending to hold the shape while the mind remains frantic is worse than useless. The body and the mind must teach each other until they are one. The form is a forge. The mind is metal. Both must be heated, both must be hammered. Those who have lived by this law for long enough develop an aura that is difficult to name. They do not raise their voices. They do not demand attention. But when they enter a room, the atmosphere bends around them. People find themselves speaking slower. Arguments falter. Even animals behave differently. Not because of force, but because the presence of someone who has shaped themselves with absolute discipline cannot be ignored. The Codex contains accounts of great rulers who had no crown and no throne, only the law of form. They shaped their bodies as they shaped their empires, line by line, until both were unbreakable. Their enemies described them as statues that breathed. You may wonder why this law comes first. It is because the body is the only domain where control can begin without permission. You cannot command the world, you cannot command others, until you can command the space you occupy. The cold mind teaches that if you can command 1 square meter, the space where your body stands, you can, over time, command a kingdom. To begin this path, the Codex prescribes a simple ritual. It is not a prayer. It is an act. At the beginning of each day, stand alone. Align the 3 angles. Straighten the spine. Fix the gaze. Hold your stance. And wait. 5 minutes. 10. Until the body stops arguing with you. The world will resist this. Your own mind will resist. But when the resistance ends, the shaping begins. Every habit of your body is a vote cast for what you will become. Those who understand this law start to watch themselves as if they were another creature. They ask, does this movement serve me? Does this shape prepare me? Or does it betray me? In time, the law of form becomes invisible. It stops being something you do and becomes something you are. And when that happens, the rest of the laws stop being distant philosophies. They become reachable. Because with the body forged, the mind can finally cool. Stillness is not an absence of motion. It is an act of control so complete that motion itself becomes rare, deliberate, and precise. Movement without purpose is death. This is how the second law begins. It is a principle that seems obvious, and yet almost no warm-blooded creature follows it. Look at the way people live: restless hands, tapping feet, constant rushing between tasks that do not matter. Noise in the mind creates noise in the body, and soon the whole life becomes an accident that never stops happening. The reptilian way is different. They see movement as energy, a currency. Every step, every gesture, is paid for out of a finite store. Spend it carelessly, and it is gone. Spend it with purpose, and it multiplies. Stillness, therefore, is not laziness. It is investment. To understand this, you must imagine a predator that does not chase everything it sees. It waits. It conserves. It reads the shape of the world until the single moment comes when a single motion decides everything. This is the way of the Codex. Stillness begins inside. It is a quieting of the inner tide. It is the recognition that to act without a reason is to betray yourself. It is said in the Codex that those who cannot be still cannot rule even themselves. They are like a hand that trembles when it tries to draw a line. The intention may be strong, but the mark will always be crooked. The masters of this law train not by holding their bodies motionless, but by untangling the need to move. When hunger rises, they watch it. When fear stirs, they watch it. They do not run from these impulses. They allow them to crest like waves and then to fall. In their private texts, there is an exercise called the hour without. For 1 hour, you do not speak. You do not touch. You do not fidget. You do not answer every itch or adjust every fold of cloth. You let the small discomforts of the body stand as they are. At first, this feels unbearable. The muscles scream to shift. The throat begs to clear. But eventually, something strange happens. The noise recedes. The body becomes a vessel instead of a cage. Those who live by the law of stillness appear slow, but they are not. They simply refuse to waste. They learn to see the timing of things the way a hunter sees the heartbeat of the forest. They can tell when someone is about to speak before a word forms. They can feel the weight of a room before entering it. And when they move, when they finally allow themselves to act, the effect is violent in its clarity because it comes without hesitation. This law applies to thought as much as to movement. The cold mind does not fill itself with idle talk. Where others speak to fill silence, the followers of the Codex allow the silence to fill them. They know that words spent recklessly are as dangerous as steps taken blindly. There are stories of entire negotiations turned by a single pause. Where the warm-blooded would rush to fill the space, the one who holds to the law of stillness waits. The longer the pause, the more the other speaks, exposing their secrets in the fear of quiet. In that gap, control emerges. Even in battle, the law of stillness reigns. A reptilian fighter moves like water held in a jar. For long stretches there is nothing, and then all at once, every stored motion releases with surgical precision. One strike. One choice. and then the world returns to quiet. But the Codex warns of the shadow side of this law. Stillness without awareness becomes paralysis. Those who freeze out of fear are not practicing stillness, they are practicing surrender. The cold mind distinguishes between the two. Stillness is a decision, never an accident. It is the readiness to move at the exact moment, and not before. For those who practice this, life itself slows. The days feel longer. The hours stretch. While others burn themselves in the friction of constant movement, the one who waits does not age the same way. Their heart beats slower. Their breath is longer. And in that time they buy with stillness, they see more. This is why the law of stillness is second. Form without stillness is wasted. A strong shape that moves chaotically is a storm with no aim. Stillness takes the form forged in the first law and turns it into a reservoir of control. In the schools of the Codex, students are told, move only when your movement ends the need to move again. Everything else is noise. There are no shortcuts to this law. No words can teach it. Only discipline. Those who fail often fail because they cannot stand to be left alone with themselves. The mind will scream. The body will ache. But those who endure come out changed, as if time itself had slowed to match them. And when that happens, the world begins to notice. Rooms fall silent when they enter, not out of respect, but because everything that is frantic recognizes something ancient in them, a patience that is colder than fear. What enters becomes what you are. The third law seems, on the surface, to be about food. But in the Codex, consumption is far broader than the hunger of the stomach. It speaks to everything that crosses the boundary of the self: what you eat, what you drink, what you watch, what you hear, even what you allow yourself to feel. All of it enters. All of it becomes part of the architecture of who you are. The cold mind sees the act of eating not as pleasure, but as inscription. Every meal is a code, and each bite carries instructions that change you, cell by cell. Warm-blooded creatures devour without thought. They eat to quiet the voice of craving, they swallow to fill the silence of the mind. And in doing so, they take chaos inside. Those who follow the law of consumption eat slowly. Not for politeness, but because they understand that intake is agreement. They never agree blindly. They ask, does this serve the form I am building? Does this serve the stillness I am shaping? If the answer is no, they refuse. In the oldest fragments of the Codex there is a sentence scratched into bone. A single taste becomes a single thought. A single thought becomes a single act. And an act, repeated, becomes the spine of a life. To feed on filth is to become filth. To feed on clarity is to become clarity. And this applies equally to the senses. Words spoken in anger, images filled with panic, music that clutters the heart, these are also forms of consumption. They enter. They sit. And they change you. The reptilian path therefore begins with abstention. It is not asceticism for the sake of suffering, but a clean slate. You remove the noise so you can hear the signal. This is why those who live by the Codex choose their environment carefully. They are not afraid of poison in the tongue, they are afraid of poison in the pattern. There are 3 stages of this practice. The first is selection. You learn to look at everything as food. Conversations, books, gestures, you ask, what will this turn me into if I let it in? The second is reduction. Once you see clearly, you remove the excess. Not because it is evil, but because it does not serve the shape you are building. If a thing has no purpose, it is not consumed. The third is integration. After a long period of control, the chosen inputs become indistinguishable from the self. The body no longer hungers for distraction. The mind no longer craves noise. And what remains is a structure as deliberate as an ancient wall, every brick chosen, every gap intentional. The Codex tells of warriors who prepared for years not by lifting a sword but by refining what they consumed. They fasted from words as much as from food. When the time came to act, their minds were empty of everything except the present moment. And because they had filled themselves only with what was necessary, they acted with the weight of everything they had taken in. But this law also has a deeper shadow. The cold mind warns against over-purification. If you consume only what confirms you, you will become brittle. And when the world shifts, as it always does, the brittle mind snaps. True discipline means knowing when to let in something alien, something unexpected, so that your form can adapt and your stillness can be tested. At its heart, this law is not about control for its own sake. It is about sovereignty. Most humans are shaped by what they consume without ever knowing they agreed to be shaped. They are written upon like paper. The Codex reverses this. You become the one who chooses what gets to leave a mark. Even breath is a form of consumption. Those who follow this path train to feel every inhale as a decision. They draw in air like they draw in information, slowly, deeply, with awareness. They exhale what they do not need. Over time, this simple act becomes a weapon. In the middle of conflict, while others drown in their own rapid breathing, the cold mind inhales once, chooses, and moves. When seen from the outside, these practices look like obsession. They look like a hunger for control. And they are. Because the Codex teaches that control is not given, it is built from within, piece by piece, choice by choice. Consumption is the shaping of destiny through the smallest possible gate, the act of letting something in. Those who understand this do not merely survive. They build themselves into a shape that cannot be swayed by the random tides of the world. This is why the law of consumption follows form and stillness. You shape the vessel. You still the vessel. And then you decide what fills it. From that moment on, you are no longer at the mercy of what surrounds you. To live by this law is to become your own author. And from that authorship, the cold mind begins to emerge. To see is to survive. The fourth law of the Codex is simple to name, but the most difficult to master. Where the warm-blooded mind is consumed by the fire inside, the cold mind looks outward. It watches. It does not blink. It sees. Observation is not passive. It is not the lazy gaze of someone standing at the edge of a crowd. It is an act of drawing patterns from the world until they become maps. It is the art of seeing without the need to react. The Codex teaches that the reason most beings perish is not lack of strength, but lack of vision. They do not see the trap until they are already inside it. They do not see the tide until it is already rising. And so they move too late. Those who follow this law train themselves to remove the blindfold of self. The first stage of their training is to stop looking only for what they expect. When an ordinary mind walks into a room, it notices faces, maybe the loudest voice, maybe the brightest color. The trained mind, the cold mind, notices what is missing. It notices where people's feet point, which way the air flows, how the rhythm of voices changes when a new presence enters. This practice is not limited to rooms. In nature, they watch the wind. In cities, they watch the currents of crowds. They learn to read the way a building leans, the way a hand holds a cup, the way a single eyelid trembles when a lie is told. All of these are messages. To the untrained, they are invisible. To the cold mind, they are louder than any words. Observation, in the Codex, is also a test of patience. You must first stop needing to act. Those who are always ready to jump cannot see. Their own movement blinds them. The reptilian path says, you are invisible as long as you do not disturb the pattern. Over centuries, those who live by this law describe a transformation. At first, it is overwhelming. The flood of detail is too much, 1,000 small signals in a single moment. But over time, the noise organizes itself. The world begins to slow. Motion divides into layers. And in that layering, opportunity appears. There is a story, told in the deepest schools of the Codex, of a master who walked through a crowded marketplace without ever being touched. People said it was as if he could see every step before it happened. When asked how he did it, he said, I do not move where I want to move. I move where space is already waiting. That is the essence of the law of observation. To stop fighting against the current, and instead to see how the current is moving before it even begins. Another aspect of this law is the control of the gaze. Those who follow the Codex practice something called soft vision. Instead of narrowing their focus on one point, they widen it, as if the whole room were entering their eyes at once. It is not a stare. It is a net. A net that catches everything. In this state, you can notice the smallest flicker at the edge of your sight without ever turning your head. Predators have done this for millions of years. The cold mind learns it by discipline. The law of observation also demands self-erasure. The more you believe yourself to be the center, the less you can see. Ego acts like a fog on the glass. Those who learn this law remove that fog. They do not approach a scene with judgment, only with attention. And in that attention, secrets reveal themselves. It is said that the greatest victories of the reptilian way are won before the first move is made. Because when you can see the entire field, not as you wish it to be, but as it is, you no longer need to struggle. The Codex says, "The one who sees everything no longer needs to fight everything." This law also explains why the cold mind rarely explains itself. What is seen is not always meant to be spoken. Words can disrupt the balance that observation builds. When you tell someone you can see through them, you change them. You alert the prey that it has been noticed. True mastery is to know when to remain silent, even as you watch. With time, observation becomes more than a skill. It becomes a way of being. The cold mind does not wake up in the morning and decide to observe. It has become its nature. The eyes are open, always. The patterns are there, always. And when you see this way, you realize that chaos does not really exist. What looks like randomness is only a pattern too wide for most to notice. The Codex gives you the width. To walk through life seeing in this way is both a gift and a burden. You will never again be surprised. But you will also never again be able to look away. Resources belong to the one who can distribute them. The fifth law of the Codex speaks of power. Not power as possession, but power as flow. To the cold mind, wealth is not measured in what you own. Ownership is a trap, a weight that ties you to the thing you cling to. Instead, the Codex teaches that true strength lies in shaping the path through which all things move. In the natural world, even before language, this principle has always been visible. The stream that carves a valley does not own the water. It guides it. The tree that grows tallest does not own the light. It channels it into its branches. Those who survive are not those who grasp, but those who can stand at the center of the currents and direct them without ever needing to hold them. Humans confuse possession with safety. They hoard. They gather objects, money, titles, and guard them as if the act of holding will keep them alive. But everything held can be taken. Everything stored can rot. The Codex teaches that the moment you need to hold something tightly, you have already declared that you are weak without it. To distribute means to decide. Food, knowledge, loyalty, these are the three resources the cold mind concerns itself with. Food keeps bodies alive. Knowledge shapes them. Loyalty binds them. And in every structure where these flow, there is always a point of control, the one who decides how, when, and to whom they are given. That person, even without a crown, becomes a king. This law does not romanticize generosity. Distribution is not about kindness. It is about structure. A cold mind asks, "If I place this resource here, what shape will form around it?" Like a sculptor working with invisible clay, they build networks of dependence. And in those networks, everyone moves in a pattern that leads back to the center. For those who have mastered the previous laws, form, stillness, consumption, and observation, the law of distribution becomes natural. They can see where energy is wasted. They can see where a single gift will bind 10 lives. They can see where withholding something will create strength in another. In practice, this law shows itself in strange ways. The cold mind will often refuse to take what they could easily seize. They will even allow others to hold things for them, knowing that what appears as independence is still shaped by their decisions. To control the source is to control the whole flow. In the ancient traditions that formed the Codex, there were leaders who never signed their names to anything. Their hands held no possessions. And yet, entire cities moved when they moved. Because every road, every market, every store of grain existed because they had once placed a single stone in the right place. People came to depend on that flow, and in that dependence, they created their own chains. Another saying within the Codex: "The most dangerous king is the one with empty hands." This law applies not only to resources but to emotion. Even kindness is a resource, and those who can give or withhold it with control shape the people around them as surely as water shapes stone. There is a shadow to this law, as there is to all of them. If used without stillness, distribution becomes manipulation. The flow collapses into greed. The Codex warns, those who distribute out of hunger for control, rather than clarity, eventually drown in their own webs. They lose the vision of the flow because they see only themselves. But when practiced with true discipline, this law leads to a strange freedom. You stop fearing loss. You stop hoarding. You begin to move through the world like the current itself, empty-handed, but unbroken. Nothing can be taken from you because you do not hold. Everything can be given through you because you know how to direct it. To follow this law is to become invisible and indispensable at the same time. People will say you are lucky. They will say that things happen for you. They will not realize that what they call chance is simply the natural result of flows that you set into motion years before. The Codex teaches that power is not the throne. Power is the riverbed. You can sit anywhere along its banks. The water will come to you. Nothing is forgotten, but not everything must be recalled. The sixth law turns the gaze inward again. If observation deals with the outer world, memory deals with the inner. It begins with a truth that most warm-blooded creatures cannot bear. Everything you have ever experienced remains inside you. Every sight, every sound, every wound, every act of love and betrayal, it is all still there. People think they forget. They do not. The mind simply buries what it cannot bear under layers of noise. The Codex does not see this as a weakness. To those who follow the cold mind, memory is a storehouse, and like any storehouse, it must be managed. There are things that must be kept close at hand, and there are things that must be locked away until the day they are needed. A human life, driven by heat, often lives at the mercy of its own memories. The past leaks into the present like a poison. A word reminds them of an old shame. A scent opens a wound from childhood. And they are thrown off course without even knowing why. The cold mind trains differently. It teaches that you cannot control what you refuse to look at. You must know what is stored inside you. You must walk through the archive of your life and name each thing. You must decide where to place it. This act alone separates those who are ruled by their memories from those who rule them. There are 3 disciplines in this law. The first is cataloging. Those who follow the Codex spend long periods recalling their own lives. Not with emotion, but with precision. They do not relive, they record. They gather everything that has shaped them into a map. The second is sealing. Once something has been named and understood, it is placed deliberately. Some memories are kept close, ready to be used as fuel. Others are set aside, locked deep. They are not destroyed, the Codex forbids destruction, but they are silenced until their time comes. The third is extraction. When a situation calls for strength, the cold mind knows exactly which memory to unseal. Pain becomes a blade in the moment it is needed. Anger becomes a wall. Even joy, carefully stored, can be released like a torch in darkness. It is said that to a master of this law, time is a tool. They can choose to live in any moment they have already survived. They can see the lessons of their own history with such clarity that no present event can blindside them. This discipline has a cost. Those who live by it must face everything they have hidden. They walk into rooms in their own mind where others never dare to look. And yet that is where the cold mind becomes invincible, because nothing is left waiting to ambush it. There is a danger here as well. The Codex warns that those who open too many sealed doors at once can drown. To unearth pain without the discipline of stillness and form can destroy a life as surely as any weapon. That is why the earlier laws are essential. A body strong enough to stand, a stillness deep enough to hold, an awareness clear enough to navigate, and a flow stable enough to carry the weight of memory. The greatest mistake warm-blooded minds make is believing that forgetting frees them. It does not. Forgetting only makes you vulnerable to the same wound, again and again. The cold mind remembers. And because it remembers, it does not step into the same trap twice. There is an ancient phrase, carved into one of the oldest artifacts of the Codex. To remember is to sharpen the blade. To forget is to drop it. This law does not encourage bitterness. It encourages clarity. You do not hold a grudge, you hold a record. You do not cling to what hurt you, you transform it into structure. Those who practice this law become frightening to others. Not because they are cruel, but because they seem immune to manipulation. You cannot blackmail someone who has already faced their worst moment and placed it where it belongs. You cannot shame someone who has taken their own shame and turned it into stone. And there is one more gift that memory gives to those who master it: patience. When you carry the map of your entire life with you, you know that no single day is the whole story. You have seen the long arc. You know that pain fades, victories fade, everything fades. You learn to wait. What does not adapt must vanish. By intent. The final law is the one that most terrifies those who first encounter the Codex. It is the sharp edge hidden beneath all the others. Where the earlier laws shape the self, this one shapes the world around it. The law of extinction begins with a truth that the cold mind holds as sacred: there is no mercy in evolution. Everything that survives does so because it changes. Everything that fails to change becomes fuel for what remains. To the followers of the Codex, this is not cruelty. It is structure. It is the way order preserves itself against the constant tide of chaos. The warm-blooded mind hates this truth. It wants to save everything, to carry everything forward, even when it has grown weak and hollow. It invents excuses for stagnation. It clings to broken systems, to decayed traditions, to people who have long stopped growing. The cold mind sees such attachment as a kind of slow suicide. Extinction in the Codex is not always physical. It can mean the end of a habit, the removal of an idea, the deliberate cutting away of anything that no longer serves survival. It is pruning. It is cleaning. It is the hand that keeps the structure alive by refusing to let rot spread through it. This law is the most active of all 7. It requires courage, because it does not wait for decay to finish its work. It acts. When a pattern has proven that it cannot change, the cold mind removes it. It does not hesitate. In the hidden teachings there is an image, a garden with one diseased branch. Left alone, it will poison the whole tree. Cut away, the tree lives. That is the nature of this law. It applies inward as much as outward. Those who live by the Codex examine themselves relentlessly, and when they see a part of themselves that refuses to grow, they do not excuse it. They dismantle it. They do not allow the comfort of, "This is just who I am." In the Codex, nothing is untouchable. Everything must evolve, or it will be left behind. On a larger scale, this law explains the silent hand that has guided empires. Cultures that refuse to adapt collapse. Those who cling to a single way of seeing, a single way of ruling, fall to those who can change shape without warning. The cold mind does not mourn this. It sees the ruin of the old as the soil for something sharper. There is no pity in this law, but there is clarity. It recognizes that mercy, applied without discernment, is a form of harm. To spare what cannot adapt is to harm everything that depends on the structure being strong. There are, however, strict limits. Extinction is not chaos. It is not destruction for its own sake. It is selective. It is measured. It is done with stillness, never with rage. The cold mind asks, what will be strengthened if this is removed? And acts only when the answer is certain. In the oldest fragments of the Codex, one line appears again and again like a mantra. The weak must die, but the death must be chosen. This choice, conscious, deliberate, is what distinguishes the reptilian path from blind violence. To strike without thought is just another form of weakness. Those who understand this law learn to live in a constant state of refinement. They do not become attached to what they were yesterday. They are willing to destroy their own structure if it means building a stronger one from its remains. The world misunderstands this law as cold-blooded cruelty. But cruelty is random, aimless. This law is exact. Its goal is continuity. In time, a strange peace comes with this understanding. Because when you know that everything changes or vanishes, you stop clinging to things that cannot survive. You begin to see endings as necessary. you begin to see loss as the hidden price of strength. Those who practice the law of extinction stand in the present moment like a blade. They cut away what no longer serves without looking back. And in that cutting, the space for new growth appears, clean, clear, inevitable. When the 7 are seen separately, they look like rules. But the Codex was never a list. It is a structure. Each law feeds into the next until they form a closed circle, a self-contained organism of discipline. Form creates the vessel. Stillness strengthens it. Consumption fills it with deliberate substance. Observation turns its attention outward, so that no movement in the world goes unseen. Distribution begins to shape the flow of that world. Memory turns inward again, holding the entire path of the self without being ruled by it. And extinction clears away everything that no longer serves, ensuring the cycle remains sharp. The result of this circle is something entirely different from an ordinary life. A person who begins with only the first law and moves step by step to the 7th does not simply learn. They transform. At first, the transformation is invisible. It happens in the quiet adjustments, how they stand, how they move, how they stop wasting themselves on noise. The changes are so small that even those closest to them hardly notice. Then something strange begins to happen. The world starts responding differently. The same room feels larger. The same conflicts feel slower. The same mistakes that once came so easily begin to pass them by as if they are no longer there. This is the hidden gift of the Codex. The cold mind stops living like prey. Prey runs. Prey reacts. Prey spends its life trying not to be consumed. But the one who embodies the laws begins to live like a current, silent, patient, shaping everything it touches without having to strike it. The Codex is sometimes called the coil, for this reason. Its wisdom does not spread out like a line, but circles back on itself again and again. Even when the 7th law is mastered, the first is still there, waiting. The student straightens their form. They return to stillness. They refine consumption again. Each cycle is a tightening spiral. With every turn, the cold mind becomes colder, sharper, more deliberate. There is a misconception that such a path leads to cruelty or emptiness. That the one who follows these laws becomes a stone. But those who have walked this path know otherwise. The goal is not to erase feeling. The goal is to place it where it belongs. When fear no longer blinds you, you can feel fear without drowning in it. When anger no longer drives you, you can feel anger without becoming its slave. When desire no longer rules you, you can allow yourself to enjoy beauty without being captured by it. In this sense, the Codex gives back what the heat of chaos steals: choice. Every act becomes a choice. Every word a choice. Even silence a choice. And from that choice flows power, not the power of a tyrant, but the quiet, patient power of someone who has stopped being shaped by everything around them. They shape themselves. And in shaping themselves, they shape the environment that forms around them. This is why those who live by the Codex do not speak of conquest. They speak of alignment. A river does not conquer the stones it passes, it simply shapes them, grain by grain, until the landscape itself is different. So it is with the cold mind. When the 7 laws integrate fully, life becomes like that river. You stop wasting strength on what is already dying. You stop being thrown off course by the storm of other people's heat. You stop being ruled by impulses that were never yours to begin with. Instead, you begin to notice how much of what you called you was only reaction. And in that noticing, you create something new. A being that moves slowly, chooses deliberately, and builds structures that last long after the moment has ended. This is not the end of the Codex. It is the beginning. For the one who has integrated the 7, the question becomes: what will you do with such clarity? Where will you choose to place the weight of your attention? And what shape will the world take, now that your own shape is no longer an accident? To live by the Codex is to step out of the current of ordinary life. At first, you will feel as if you have exiled yourself. The warmth that fills others, the rush, the distraction, the noise, all of it begins to fade. You become an island of silence surrounded by a storm. But the longer you hold to the 7 laws, the more you realize that this silence is not emptiness. It is space. Space to see. Space to choose. Space to move without being dragged by everything that once controlled you. Those who have truly followed the path of the cold mind do not speak of peace as a feeling. Peace, for them, is geometry, a structure built out of discipline. They stand like a pillar, and the winds that once bent them simply flow around them now. What happens to a life shaped this way? First, the body changes. Breath slows. The pulse becomes steady. The muscles no longer move without a reason. Years begin to pass differently. You age slower because you do not burn yourself with every useless reaction. Then, the mind changes. The thoughts that once came like flocks of birds, hundreds, chaotic, frightened, begin to quiet. Ideas become deliberate. Every emotion has its place. Fear does not vanish, but when it comes as a visitor, not a tyrant. And finally, the world around you changes. Because when you stop being pulled by chaos, chaos can no longer see you. Conflicts that would once have swallowed you whole seem to move around you like water around a stone. People feel the difference. They respond without knowing why. They slow their voices in your presence. They become careful. Some will fear you. Others will follow you. It does not matter which. The Codex does not exist to make someone a leader or a ruler. It exists to create someone who cannot be ruled. There are dangers. You will be tempted to cut too much, too soon, by the law of extinction. You will be tempted to wall yourself so completely behind stillness that you forget what it means to be alive. You will be tempted to confuse control with coldness. The Codex warns of this. The 7 laws are not walls. They are a frame. Within that frame, life can grow in any shape you choose, but if you let the frame collapse, the shape collapses with it. If you hold the laws too rigidly, you turn into stone. If you hold them with clarity, you turn into something rarer, a mind that has mastered heat, instead of being mastered by it. And when that happens, when all 7 have been integrated, the Codex speaks of a final transformation. It says that the self becomes transparent. You no longer waste time thinking about yourself at all. There is only the act in front of you, chosen with precision, shaped by every law at once. Those who witness someone in this state often describe them as if they do not belong entirely to the same timeline. They move when the rest of the world hesitates. They stop when the rest of the world panics. They seem, to those who live in heat, almost like a different species. Perhaps that is the truth behind the myths, the stories of cold-blooded ones among us, hidden in plain sight. Perhaps the reptilian is not a form, but a state of mind that has been cultivated for thousands of years by those who chose to live by the Codex. The question, then, is simple. When the heat of the world rises, when chaos calls for you to join the fire, will you follow it? Or will you choose the colder path? The 7 laws have been spoken. Form. Stillness. Consumption. Observation. Distribution. Memory. Extinction. They are neither good nor evil. They are a way of moving through existence. And now that you know them, you can no longer pretend not to see the patterns they reveal. If you feel the pull of this knowledge, if even a fragment of you wishes to step out of the heat and into that clarity, take one step. Just one. Straighten the form. Breathe slower. Watch. Everything begins from there. If you have felt the pull of the Codex, subscribe now. Write in the comments, which law do you feel in your bones, and which one frightens you most? Explore the other Codex videos on your screen. They are pieces of the same hidden map.